The observation dome of Xylar 9 stretched high above the alien scientists like a crystalline cathedral, its angular panes shimmering faintly from the energy coursing through the station's core. Normally, the halls of this facility echoed with the orderly cadence of focused research, scientific debates, and precise, measured experiments. But today, an air of nervous anticipation hung thick, knotting every tendril, quivering every antenna, and stiffening every scale. "Is this level of precaution really necessary?" asked Professor Ebnat, his gills flaring with agitation. He paced in tight, jittery circles, clutching a tablet loaded with human psychological profiles, a fraught tapestry of daring exploits and inexplicable survival stories that, according to him, bordered on apocalyptic recklessness. I mean, he's just one human. One human from Earth, Galtus corrected. His large compound eyes blinked twice in unison, a rare sign of unease among his insectoid species. "You know what that means. The reports are clear. Earth is a Class 12 death world. Extreme environments, predatory ecosystems, unyielding climate swings. How any species evolved there is horrifying." Nessa, a sleek, emerald-scaled reptiloid, folded her clawed arms and regarded her colleagues coolly. "The human is here to help," she said, her voice a measured rasp. "We invited him because none of our conventional methods have stabilized the quantum core. We're running out of time." She tapped a claw against her own tablet, which displayed the station's energy fluctuations as an erratic, jagged waveform. If not for the human's reputation, Xylar 9 would already be an empty ruin. Or a crater, Ebnat mumbled, eyes wide. A crackling announcement from the docking bay interrupted further debate. "Attention, all personnel. Incoming shuttle carrying human specialist Mark Sutter. Arrival imminent. Repeat, human specialist Mark Sutter arriving." The scientists shared a collective moment of silence, filled with dread for some and a flicker of hope for others. The shuttle docked with a mechanical hiss, and steam billowed outward, cloaking the ramp in theatrical mist. Alien sensors adjusted, processing the figure stepping through with long, confident strides. The human was tall by Galactic Confederation standards, broad-shouldered, with unruly brown hair and a smile that radiated warmth but also, Ebnat feared, a hint of madness. He wore a simple jumpsuit with a few scuffs and burns that suggested a man familiar with danger and unconcerned about cosmetic appearances. A duffel bag dangled from one arm, oddly mundane in a facility bristling with the galaxy's most advanced technology. Mark paused at the end of the ramp, squinting into the bright, antiseptic lighting of the docking bay. "Hey there," he called, voice deep but friendly. "Name's Mark. Which one of you fine folks do I need to talk to about saving this station?" The scientists exchanged stunned glances. They had braced for a boisterous, perhaps even brutish arrival, but this casual, almost cavalier demeanor unsettled them more. He spoke as if saving entire facilities were just another Tuesday afternoon. Vesa stepped forward, clearing her throat. "Human specialist Mark Sutter, welcome to Xylar 9. I am Vesa, senior researcher and task coordinator. We have read about your exploits." Mark's smile widened. "All good, I hope." Mostly, Vesa lied diplomatically, her scales rippling in what might have been a smile or nervousness. "The station faces a crisis. The quantum stabilizer, our primary energy source, is failing." As if on cue, a tremor rattled through the station. Overhead lights flickered. A low, ominous hum pulsed through the walls. "Ah," Mark said, glancing around, seemingly unfazed by the disturbance. "Looks like we've got work to do. Point me in the right direction." Ebnat stepped closer, unable to keep his concern at bay. "Do you understand what you're walking into? The quantum core is unstable, emitting spatial distortions and energy waves capable of fracturing reality itself. This requires precision," not he eyed the duffel bag skeptically. "Whatever it is you have in there." Mark slung the bag onto the nearest table, unzipped it, and began pulling out its contents. A few alien-designed tools mixed with surprisingly archaic human instruments, a hammer, wire cutters, rolls of what looked suspiciously like duct tape, and an object Ebnat identified as a toaster. After furiously consulting his database, Mark caught him staring. "Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best," Mark said with a wink. "Trust me." Within the next few hours, Mark insisted on inspecting every subsystem related to the quantum stabilizer, crawling into access tunnels that made the aliens claustrophobic just to look at. He ran diagnostics with strange contraptions, some of which he built on the spot using spare parts and alien tech, as if he were assembling a child's toy. His methods were chaotic, impulsive, and completely alien to the Isolarians' measured approach. Yet, they could not ignore the data. When the first minor stabilization was achieved, Galtus stared in open disbelief. He did something the insectoid whispered, mandibles clacking. It should not have worked. Mark emerged from a crawl space, wiping sweat from his brow, and grinned. Oh, it'll hold. For now he motioned for Vesa to show him the next readouts. How unstable are we talking here? Don't touch that unstable, or blow up the galaxy unstable. Ebnat felt his gills twitch violently. This was exactly the kind of gallows humor he had feared. The second one he burst out. We're on the precipice of oblivion, and you're treating it like some jest. The human paused, his eyes softening. Look, I get it. This is your home, your lives at stake. I won't pretend it isn't bad. But sometimes in situations like this, a little humor keeps the mind sharp. Let's get through this first, then we can panic. The aliens found themselves stunned into silence again, unsure whether they had invited a savior or a harbinger of chaos. But even Ebnat couldn't deny the shift the stabilizer's oscillations, once uncontrollable, now flickered with a tenuous but real stability. Vesa nodded slowly. We continue. Unbeknownst to Mark, someone was watching him. A figure moved in the shadows of the observation decks, eyes narrowed with suspicion. Twice now, the human had taken liberties no one else dared. While some whispered that his ingenuity was a gift, others suspected a hidden motive. And in a station where a single slip could spell oblivion, trust was fragile. The saboteur paused, contemplating the chaos one small push could unleash, then vanished into the darkened corridors. The central core of Xylar 9, a towering construct of shifting metallic rings and humming conduits, loomed over Mark and his alien colleagues like a mechanical god on the verge of wrath. It pulsed erratically, sending out waves of energy that distorted light and bent space-time around it. This was the heart of their problem, the quantum stabilizer, a technology so complex that most races considered it a myth. The Xylarians had made it reality. Unfortunately, reality was now cracking at the seams. Standing next to Mark, Vesa studied the readouts with her sharp reptilian eyes. The core's frequency deviation has tripled since your initial adjustments, she said, tapping a claw on her tablet screen. Stability is at a critical threshold. Sounds like a polite way of saying it's worse than I thought, Mark muttered. He didn't seem rattled, but his shoulders tensed as he scanned the data. I assume if we let this thing run wild, the station goes boom. Not precisely, said Ebnat, who had regained some composure but still looked pale. A boom suggests conventional destruction. This would be more of a dimensional implosion, a rupture in space-time that could consume nearby systems. Ah, gotcha. Extra boom, Mark replied with a casual nod. He stuffed a spanner into a compartment and turned to Galtus. What's the current energy output on the auxiliary nodes? Galtus, perched uncomfortably close to an auxiliary terminal, chittered nervously, fluctuating between acceptable variance and total meltdown every 3.2 minutes. Lovely. The human didn't waste another moment. He strode to a control panel, yanked off its cover, and started tinkering with a fervor that terrified Ebnat. Wires sparked, metal groaned, and Mark's hands blurred as he connected and disconnected conduits with the decisiveness of someone who'd long ago accepted that hesitation meant death. Vesa sidled up next to him, watching with wary interest. Is this normal behavior for your kind, she asked, trying not to wince as a jet of plasma narrowly missed Mark's ear. He paused just long enough to shoot her a lopsided grin. Define normal. Ah, she said dryly, taking a step back. The human's frantic pace slowed for a moment, and his eyes became serious. Look, I know this all seems nuts, but if we can isolate the quantum stabilizer's oscillations to a single output stream, we might have a chance to contain the runaway energy. Think of it like rerouting a flood through one massive canal instead of letting it overflow everywhere. Vesa blinked. A canal? You're speaking of a river? We're dealing with quantum energy here. Same principle, he said with maddening calm. We just need a bigger shovel. For days, Mark and the Auxiliarians threw themselves into the work. The stabilizer was a beast, and taming it required more than brute force. It needed precision, insight, and a willingness to gamble with equations that defied sense. Mark's methods confounded his colleagues. He scrawled diagrams on walls, used random objects to test energy flow, and cobbled together solutions from pieces of unrelated technology. One such instance left Galtus staring in bewilderment. "Why are you using that toaster?" he asked as Mark inserted alien wiring into the slots of the human appliance. "What possible use could this have?" "Thermal redistribution testing," Mark said matter-of-factly. "It's a classic." Ebnat shook his head in horror. "That is neither classic nor logical. That is madness." "Madness is what works when logic fails," Mark shot back, flipping a switch. The toaster hummed, and for a brief, wondrous moment, the stabilizer's energy patterns flattened. See, Mark beamed. "Who wants toast?" His smile faded as sparks erupted from the toaster, sending it clattering across the room. The stabilizer resumed its chaotic oscillations. Mark shrugged, already thinking of the next idea. "Okay, plan B." Yet not everyone appreciated the humans' relentless efforts. Whispers spread through the station like spores on a wind current. Rumors, stoked by fear and frustration, painted Mark as a potential threat. He was, after all, a Deathworlder, a creature from a place of carnivorous plants, poisonous seas, and skies that raged with fire. What if his presence was a calculated move? What if he intended to dismantle the station? One evening, while Mark rested in a dimly lit maintenance bay, the answer to those fears came in the form of sabotage. It began subtly. An energy conduit that Mark had meticulously reinforced collapsed during a routine test, causing a cascading surge that nearly fried the stabilizer's control systems. The emergency alarms blared, sending red light flashing across every corridor. Mark was there in seconds, wrench in hand, only to find a charred mess and an atmosphere thick with distrust. Ebnat arrived, breathless and panicked. "What did you do?" the professor hissed, eyes blazing. "I fixed it hours ago," Mark snapped back, inspecting the damage. His tone was cold. Someone tampered with it. "You expect us to believe that?" another researcher demanded. "You have done things none of us understand. Perhaps you wanted this to happen." Mark stared hard at them, jaw clenched. "I'm here to help. Blowing up your station wasn't on my to-do list." Enough. Vessa's voice cut through the noise like a blade. She stood tall, emerald scales reflecting the pulsating light. "We have no proof of who is responsible. What we do know is that the quantum stabilizer remains unstable and that everyone here has a duty to fix it." Mark met her gaze, some of the tension easing. He gave a curt nod. "Right, let's get back to work." Despite the sabotage, Mark redoubled his efforts, refusing to let fear or suspicion slow him down. He remained under scrutiny. Ebnat kept watchful eyes on him at all times. But as Mark worked, hints of his humanity peeked through the layers of improvisation and reckless bravery. He would pause to adjust a control panel, then share a joke that left Galtus chittering with reluctant amusement. He spoke with Vessa late into the nights about homeworlds, cultures, and the wild unpredictability of life. He even listened patiently when Ebnat lectured him about sensible precautions before ignoring those same lectures minutes later. But the crisis deepened. The stabilizer's instability worsened, triggering localized distortions that made the fabric of reality itself ripple and fray. Mark knew they were running out of time. It was during one such distortion event, with gravity shifting unpredictably around them, that the human made a breakthrough. He was grappling with a piece of alien machinery, trying desperately to recalibrate a containment field when the walls warped, stretching and contracting like breathing lungs. Mark's tools slipped, and he almost fell into a swirling vortex that had opened in the floor. Ebnat screamed. Galtus flailed helplessly. Vessa lunged to help, but Mark grabbed onto a stabilizing beam and clung there, sweat streaming down his face. He twisted his body, one hand gripping a cable that sparked dangerously. "Hang tight," he yelled. "I've got an idea." With a burst of adrenaline, He managed to attach the cable to an energy modulator nearby. As soon as the connection was made, the vortex shrank and disappeared. The distortion stopped, leaving the room shaking. Panting, Mark looked up at the aliens, his knuckles white from the effort. "What was that idea?" exactly Vesa demanded, voice hoarse. Mark's lips cracked into a grin. "Just thought I'd reroute excess quantum flux through a controlled oscillatory bypass." The words hung in the air. Slowly, the realization of what he'd done sank in. Galtus's antennae quivered. "You contained a quantum distortion with a cable." "It worked, didn't it?" Mark said, slumping back with a tired laugh. Vesa shook her head, scales rippling. "Madness," she whispered. "Absolute madness." Ebnat stepped forward, a hint of something new in his eyes, not fear, but reluctant respect. "Perhaps madness is what we need." But not everyone agreed. Somewhere in the shadowed halls of the station, the saboteur watched and plotted, determined to end what they saw as the true threat, the Deathworlder who defied reality itself. The days wore on with mounting pressure, the relentless pulse of the quantum stabilizer's instability casting a constant hum of danger through every wall and corridor of Xylar 9. Mark worked with grim determination, his humor growing sharper, more sardonic, as exhaustion gnawed at him. The aliens had seen his type before, bravado masking fatigue, but they had never witnessed anyone function so well under such extreme duress. And yet, the stabilizer's wild oscillations would not relent. The threat of total collapse loomed larger each hour. Vesa and Galtus found Mark standing in front of a cracked containment panel one morning, examining a digital display with bloodshot eyes. The air was heavy with ozone and tension. He hadn't slept, none of them had. His jumpsuit was frayed, and his usually bright eyes had a haunted edge, but when he turned to them he managed a smile crooked, but genuine. "Good news," he said, his voice raspy. "I think I've figured out a way to stabilize the core. Bad news is it's going to be risky." Galtus's antennae drooped, and Vesa's scales flushed dark green. "Riskier than what we've been doing?" Vesa asked, her tone sharp. She didn't bother to hide her concern. "You've nearly been pulled into dimensional fractures twice, Mark. We've all seen how unstable it's become." He nodded, expression turning serious. "I know. That's why this plan is going to involve every bit of crazy duct tape and hope human engineering I've got. We need to force a controlled reset of the quantum stabilizer. It's the only way to purge the erratic energy buildup." Ebnat, who had been eavesdropping from behind a panel, stepped forward, gills flaring. "A reset? You're talking about completely destabilizing the core to stabilize it again. That's a paradoxical death wish." "Not if we do it right," Mark insisted. "Think of it like rebooting a computer, but with a teeny, tiny chance of collapsing reality." "Teeny," tiny Galtus squeaked. "Very teeny," Mark said, grinning in a way that did little to reassure anyone. Vesa crossed her arms, tail twitching. "Explain the plan." Mark outlined his approach with a frenetic energy that bordered on manic, but every step was methodical. First, they would siphon excess energy into temporary containment fields scattered across key points in the station. It was a desperate gambit that required delicate calibration, coordination, and a deep understanding of quantum mechanics, something Mark apparently excelled at, despite his unorthodox methods. The final stage would involve manually venting the destabilized energy through an artificial singularity, a miniature black hole they would generate at precisely the right moment. It would require precise timing, nerves of steel, and the cooperation of everyone on board. "It's not exactly a textbook solution," Mark admitted, tracing a finger across a holographic model of the station. "But hey, that's why you called in the Deathworlder, right?" No one laughed. They were too busy weighing their lives against this plan's razor-thin margin of error. Preparations began immediately. Mark worked side by side with Vesa, Galtus, and even a reluctant Ebnat, all of whom saw the necessity of putting aside their doubts. Energy relays were reinforced, containment nodes were constructed from every spare part they could find, and delicate calibrations were made to the stabilizer's core. But as the moment of execution drew near, disaster struck. An explosion ripped through one of the key containment nodes. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and a plume of smoke filled the air. Mark raced toward the scene, heart pounding, to find twisted metal and shattered equipment. Galtus stood nearby, trembling in shock. "Sabotage," he whispered. "Someone did this." Mark clenched his fists, fury sparking in his eyes. "Not now," he muttered. "Not when we're so close." Ebnat, shaken but determined, spoke up. "We'll rebuild. We have no choice." Mark nodded, then turned to Vesa. "Stay with me. We can't let whoever did this stop us." They worked feverishly, patching the node, redirecting energy, and monitoring every fluctuation. As they toiled, the saboteur still at large made another attempt on Mark's life, nearly sending a wave of plasma his way. But Mark, eyes sharp, dodged and countered with an improvised shield made of spare parts. Vesa roared, scales flaring, and pursued the fleeing figure. The chase ended in a hidden alcove, where Vesa cornered the saboteur, a fellow scientist, twisted by fear of the human's presence. "You've endangered us all," Vesa hissed, pinning them. "Why?" "They brought the Deathworlder here," the saboteur spat. "They trusted a monster. He'll bring nothing but ruin." "No," Vesa said coldly. "He's the one saving us." The saboteur was restrained, and with precious little time remaining, Mark and the team pressed forward. Trust was fragile, but it held barely. The day of the controlled reset arrived. The team assembled around the quantum stabilizer, their movements precise and deliberate. The air crackled with tension. Mark stood at the central console, eyes fixed on a digital timer counting down to the singularity's creation. "Everyone ready?" he asked. Vesa's scales shone with determination. Galtus twitched nervously but nodded. Even Ebnet, pale but resolute, was there. Mark took a deep breath. "On my mark, vent all excess energy into the containment nodes. No hesitation." The timer reached 0. Chaos erupted. Energy surged, lighting arced, and the stabilizer bucked violently. Mark barked orders, fingers dancing across the console. Containment fields at max capacity. Stabilizer core at 150% output. Vesa, now. Vesa slammed a clawed hand down on a panel, releasing the energy. Containment nodes glowed red-hot, straining to hold the impossible power. Mark's mind raced. Timing was everything. With a single movement, he activated the singularity generator. Space twisted, and gravity lurched as the miniature black hole formed. "Redirecting flux now," he shouted. The stabilizer unleashed its full energy into the singularity. The station trembled, creaked, and for one terrifying moment, reality itself bent. But then a sudden, deafening silence. The stabilizer's pulse normalized, its chaotic oscillations smoothing out. The black hole dissipated, energy spent. It was over. Mark swayed on his feet, exhaustion crashing over him. Vesa caught his arm, supporting him. "You did it," she said softly. No, Mark replied, his voice hoarse but proud. "We did it." The scientists around them erupted into cheers, their relief palpable. Ebnat approached, hesitant but sincere. "Human specialist Mark Sutter, I misjudged you. Your methods may be madness, but they saved us." Mark chuckled weakly. "I'll take that as a compliment." As the crew began repairs and celebrated their narrow escape from oblivion, the saboteur was taken into custody. In the days that followed, Mark's heroics became legend on Xylar 9. He spent a few more weeks helping with repairs, laughing with Vesa, swapping stories with Galtus, and even enduring Ebnat's endless questions about human ingenuity. When it was time for him to leave, the station's personnel gathered to bid farewell. Vesa stepped forward, scales shimmering. "We will never forget what you've done, Mark." He smiled, shouldering his duffel bag. "Just call if you need more Deathworlder madness." The station laughed, the tension of their shared ordeal melting away. Mark's shuttle lifted off, leaving behind a station that would long tell the story of the human who defied the odds and made even the impossible look easy.